This is not going public, is it?
Welcome to La Casita Martinez, where we indulge in the art of deep conversation and vulnerability in pursuit of self-love, self-expression, and self-value. I am your host, Samantha Martinez. On this week's episode, we're sitting down with my husband, Gerson Martinez, to talk about how marriage has changed his perception of women's value and how that influences the way he raises his two daughters. So we got a question from our IG poll, which states, how does your husband feel about the amount of shopping that you do?
So my views on this have evolved over time. I have to say, when we were younger, it really did get to me. It really was something that I think bothered me. But we've gotten to a really healthy cadence and healthy place in terms of our consumption habits. And I use the word "our" loosely, but no, I think I can say that, in this kind of moment, in this season of our lives, like, your shopping is your fun space. It's one of those things that makes you who you are and makes you happy, and so I support it.
You support it. You literally support it. But to just give context, when we first got married, I was not working. So you supported my shopping, literally at the beginning. And we also didn't have a great understanding of finances, I would say, like we do now.
Yeah.
We also... That was back when I was living in New York. I didn't have a community, so it was kind of like filling my time. And then now, obviously, it became something that I love and I'm passionate about.
Yeah. I think I would also say, sorry to interrupt, but I would say also probably the reasons for consuming, or having things or whatever. You just mentioned, we lived in New York, and unfortunately, it's extremely competitive, comparative, environment. And when you're young and impressionable, you want to be and do and have, the things that your neighbors or coworkers have. So I think the motivations for having things or consuming, or buying stuff were different from what they are today. And I really, by the way, I have a whole lot of appreciation and respect for the type of brand that you're building right now, which is about understanding and valuing yourself, and then seeing your outward appearance, which includes the clothing that you buy, as an expression of the love that you have for yourself inside, which is so different from buying stuff to cover up, right? Or buying stuff to substitute, for something
or
that's empty.
to impress others, which that was the reason 13 years ago when we were in New York.
Right.
It's like, okay, well, keeping up with everyone and the haves and have-nots, where now it's not to impress anyone, but because I love it and that's how I express myself.
Yep.
But what I was going to say is, in the topic of marriage, are finances and the way you navigate that. And I think we finally came to a place where we feel very comfortable with the way that we deal with our finances. Where when we first got married, we were so young. Again, I wasn't working, you were, so it was tricky, in the way that we had to. And there's not a one size fits all, and not everything's going to work for everyone. And the first thing didn't work for us. We had to try multiple different things to find what works for us. So I think that's really important as we talk about marriage.
Yep.
But I wanted to center women because it's Women's History Month. And so I wanted to talk to you about your childhood and how women played a role in your life, besides from obviously being birthed by a woman, but being raised by your grandma, your tias, and what role they played in your life and how that changed your perspective growing up.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, I was as kind of interesting detail about my family. My parents had me here. I was born to a young and married couple. here in the States. And unfortunately, though, because of their circumstances, they had to send me to El Salvador, where they're from, when I was 4 months old. So I was raised for the first like 3 years of my life by my grandmother and, a couple of aunts, an uncle who still lived at home, a collection of people. But really, the brunt of the child rearing was done by my grandmother. But so I think my concept of who women are and their importance, they were an extremely present, force in my life. And that's in my earliest, I think, formative kind of years. It's clear. It's definitely where I got my sense of stability and love, right? It's like, these are the folks who love me, care for me, feed me, right? So women, from the outset, I think have played a central and played a central and important role in my earliest upbringing.
Hmm. And then you came back to the States when you were about 3. Grew up with both your mom and your dad. You didn't have a sister,
Mhm.
but the women in your life here have very strong personalities. Again, your grandma came back with you. You grew up with your mom then, who also has a strong personality,
Mhm.
cousins,
Mhm.
aunts. How did you, when the society was telling you otherwise, I guess, about what a woman
Mhm.
should look like, act like, how they should speak or dress, did you see something different in your childhood?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because I think as I uh, went into school age, right? Elementary school, middle school, high school. Um, a lot of what shaped my perception of what a woman is or should be, or who a woman is, or who a woman should be. Not even a lot. I would say like 99% of what shaped my perception of what women should be was my faith community. I come from a large faith-filled, family, for who faith is an incredibly central part of everyone's life. It's also our community, right? It was also my only community growing up. So every cue that I learned as a kid about what women are came from that context, and we're evangelical Christian. That's I was brought up evangelical Christian. Um,
And the culture aspect
Oh
plays a
yeah,
huge role.
exactly. Yeah, and also I'm the son of two Salvadoran immigrants. If anyone's listening who comes from a household like that, you can very clearly readily identify that these are oftentimes very kind of patriarchal, command and control sort of households, right? I think a lot of my cues about what women were supposed to be came from that, from that from that realm. And yet I had this grandmother and mom and aunts who were extremely uh, smart, independent, not the type of women who would just, bow to every man that crossed their path, but rather had this kind of fire inside and this will to express themselves. So it was quite the juxtaposition, between what I was, taught that women are supposed to be, the ideal woman should be, and the type of personalities, in my own family. So it was an interesting kind of contrast, that I got to experience.
Mhm. And so then growing up, you went off to college and then you had a couple relationships, and then
I didn't.
Samantha Martinez came into your life. So let's talk about how marriage changed your
Yeah.
perception of women.
Yeah. When I stepped into marriage, everything that I thought, and everything that I believed about what my marriage should be, again, came from what I learned, in my faith community. But I would say I had not yet experienced any of it, right? I had just been taught. And like any child or young person, you think who you're going to be and what you're going to be and how you're going to be, but until you start experiencing life for yourself, then you can start to make your own decisions, and your own determinations about how your life and how your marriage, how your relationships are going to be. So in our case, um I think very early on, I started to make determinations for myself about how I wanted the relationship that I wanted with my wife, and it wasn't going to be one of subordination, right? I was taught that unequivocally women are subordinate to men. And I use that word deliberately because it's not like, oh no, you're your partner, but you're equal. No, no, no. There was never any of that language. It was like you are subordinate. The man's word, that the guy can pull the trump card any and always, and it was always defended. And it was always vehemently defended in the Christian community that was the order of things. And as a young person, I thought that was I definitely didn't want that in my own marriage. I thought my wife is going to have my respect, and just in the out in the world, that's how you earn respect as well. You give it in order to earn it. So I didn't step into marriage being like, I'm gonna, my wife is subordinate to me, and I always get to the last say, even if I give her some concessions. But she's ultimately got to do what I say. That's just not how I decided to approach, marriage. But that's because I was starting to experience it for myself.
Mm. And what do you think changed that perception? Like understanding that you grew up that way, you saw it in the church and your
Mhm.
faith within your family, even though your mom is very strong-willed,
Yeah.
she did play that part in being subordinate
Yep.
to her husband.
Right.
What do you think changed that for you? Like, it's weird to me that you didn't walk into marriage being like, no, this is how it goes. Because it would have been a problem. I would have been
Yeah.
like, listen, this is
Yeah.
not what I
No,
signed
that's
up for, even though I also grew up that way.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
I guess it's just a generational thing.
Yeah.
But I wonder what that was that changed it for us to come in and be like, that's not how it's gonna go
Yeah,
down.
no, to be honest, I don't, I wouldn't be able to answer that like exactly or with precision, because I think it was perhaps somewhere in my subconscious. I think that I was observing that women, since we're talking specifically about women were often the ones who were hurt in the marriage relationship. I never saw a man hurt, emotionally, physically, spiritually. It was always the woman who seemed to be in some sort of just excruciating pain
Turmoil.
or turmoil, or
Hmm.
just absolutely needing to plead with God and rely on her faith community. It was always the woman. And I'm like, hmm, like first of all, that seemed a little imbalanced. And then secondly, the other thing, probably the more salient thing, is that all of the leadership of the those early communities, all of it was male, right?
Mm.
And yet most of it was quite imperfect. Most of those human males
Hmm.
were just as imperfect as the next guy, right? So I'm like, wait a minute. So how come only one of these two, groups of people is constantly on the receiving end? Look,
Hmm.
and I'm also like, I consider myself to always be on the receiving end of criticism, and as a kid, I always kind of saw myself as subordinate to people. So maybe
Hmm.
somewhere in my subconscious
Mm.
there was this empathy, with
Hmm.
women who were always forced to be subordinate, and I always felt subordinate to other people, right? Maybe that's probably my best
Mm.
guess. That no, I've never really tried to think about why I saw marriage as differently as I did,
So how did I change your life?
um,
How did I help shape your
yeah.
beautiful mind?
No, I think with you, I came into marriage. Well, first of all, you were completely unexpected to me. I didn't expect to meet the love of my life at 21 years old, I think.
Hmm.
22. We were engaged when I was 23, I think. Um, so you were unexpected. I had this like very clear like life plan, and I wasn't supposed to even consider a relationship until like my late 20s. And then we crossed paths. So I first of all, I always, now I know you have to be willing to change your life plan or change your preconceived ideas about your
Hmm.
your life. But then once you came into my life, I really honestly think I and I 13 years later here, I think the same remains true. I decided to like block out the world and say, this is my new family. Like this is my new partner. Um, and this is it. This is my family. Of course, I have extended family. I have parents, but I'm like, this is it. This is the person who gets all of my attention and all of my affection and all of my love. Um, and I think at times also we can be honest in saying like sometimes you can overstep, or overweight, that sentiment, and almost almost begin to like idolize your partner, which is
Mhm.
also not healthy. But I think you really shook my foundations in terms of what I believed or what I thought who I thought I was going to be and who I ended up becoming in partnership with you.
Mhm.
Because of course, like, one thing we haven't talked about is how you change each other in
Mhm.
marriage, right?
Mhm.
Like, and I know I've had an impact on you as well in terms of like, we are wildly different,
Mhm.
people today than we were when we first met.
Mhm.
So yeah, you changed me like immediately, I would say, like immediately started to evolve. Um, and that's now like a almost like a deliberate process, right? Like we
Mhm.
know, and we now are very much in sync, of course, in our growth, right,
Mhm.
as individuals, but also as a couple.
Which is so important to know. Another piece of advice for those who aren't married, it doesn't matter, it's never too late to start, or those who are just getting married or finding a partner, is that you definitely grow and evolve as individuals, but also as a couple.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that you have to be open to, that you're not going to be the same person 13 years later in marriage, and that your partner will evolve and will change, hopefully for the better, but that you have to be okay with that individual growth, just to become a better partner for the marriage,
Yeah.
right? And
Hmm.
then to, in lockstep, work together and move together. But yeah, we both have grown so much individually and then have just like brought that to our marriage,
Yeah.
which has been wonderful. Um, so that leads to having two strong-willed daughters.
Mhm.
You also, so you didn't have a sister. We thought we were going to have, you had just, I guess, envisioned having a boy
I had
because it was
never
just
imagined. I
easier.
couldn't imagine myself having a girl because I didn't have a sister, so I
Right.
didn't I didn't know what I might be like around girls.
So Oli came and she's the most beautiful,
Top
little,
tier.
perfect baby girl, which that changed you, which I think was
Yeah.
perfect for you because she
Yeah.
like led you into that journey of fatherhood. And
Yeah.
then bam comes Eloisa,
Yeah.
and she's your mother
Yeah.
incarnated.
Literal
And I say that with
reincarnation.
love because I love my mother-in-law, but she is a force
Yeah.
to be reckoned with, which
Yeah.
Eloisa is.
Hmm.
And so, how has, having me as your partner is
Yeah.
one thing. I'm one personality,
Yeah.
even though the girls are very much,
Carbon copies
yeah,
of
of
you.
me. But
Yeah.
how has how have you evolved understanding a woman's value in the world to then raise
Yeah.
women who, when we think about marriage, when they get older, like, we don't want them obviously to be subordinate. We also don't want them to find a partner to take care of them.
Yeah.
We want them to stand on their own 2 feet. We want someone to be their partner, to love
Yeah.
them, help them, have, just spend a life of respect and joy with,
Yeah.
but not necessarily be their savior, right?
Yeah.
We want them to be independent women.
Right.
So tell us about that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think evolving my views on who women are supposed to be, who society tells them they should be. Um, if it's been a very necessary process, right, for me to then be able to raise with you, girls who first and foremost understand themselves, have high emotional, quotients, um, can understand themselves, be self-reflective, um, um, and ultimately love themselves, learn how to love themselves, so that they don't need to go searching for that from someone else and become dependent on that
Mm-hmm.
person, right? I think we're early still in that process, right? Our girls are 3 and 7 years old, but I think at this juncture we understand, as you just said, we don't want them to be little, and I'm using air quotes, little women who are just the best thing you can do
Someone's
in life,
wife.
right?
Yeah.
The best thing you can do in life is just find the partner, and
Mm-hmm. They'll
and
complete you.
they'll complete you,
Mm-hmm.
right, right. And while those are beautiful things, I mean, we we
Mm-hmm.
we have evolved and we're growing together and we love each other, and I want that for them as well,
Absolutely.
but I don't
Mm-hmm.
want them to be dependent on such a goal, right? But rather begin by understanding themselves and loving themselves fully, and then accepting into their lives someone who loves them, exactly as they are, and is willing to grow, with them together. So I think it's a very, very different concept of parenthood that I have today versus the one that I was prescribed to have, before I myself was married, right? Life has shown me that my life as a male is infinitely better because I have a partner that eh, um with, reciprocity, respect, right? I have respect for you and you have respect for me, and for that reason we then have love,
Mhm.
and then and then we can both, kind of flourish on top of that. I want that for my children. I don't want a one-sided relationship where ultimately some guy gets to pull the trump card on my daughter whenever he wants,
Mhm.
just
Mhm.
because, just because society tells him he can.
Okay. And so then let's fast forward to a year ago where we swapped places. You became a stay-at-home dad
Yeah.
and I was continuing with my career. Um so you were home with our little one.
Yeah.
I went to work, Oli went to school. How was that as far as changing your
Oh my
perception
God.
and valuing how
Yes.
hard mothers work?
Yeah, no. Oh my God. Thanks for asking that, because I don't have anyone to talk to about this because nobody else is in this situation. But as a guy, as a classic guy with a career who sees homemaking, I guess what we call homemaking, or being a stay-at-home mom, as purely this like valueless thing. It's like, oh, she doesn't work. That's how we describe it,
Mhm.
right? Oh, she
Mhm.
doesn't work. She
She
stays at
stays
home
home with
with
the
the
kids,
kids.
yeah.
We describe it in those terms as though it's, oh yeah, no, she doesn't make anything. She doesn't do anything.
Contribute.
Yeah, she doesn't contribute.
Mhm.
And I'm generalizing. I know I'm sure a lot of you listening don't see it that way, and that's great. But I think writ large, that's kind of how society treats that discipline.
Mhm.
Having lived it,
Mhm.
a year, I I cannot believe that I was guilty of undervaluing that time and energy and um uh dedication, right?
Mhm.
Because quite literally there's no, and I'm in the process of learning this right now, that there is no more valuable thing that I can do with my time than devote it to my young children who quite literally need us right now, right?
Mhm.
Need us to feed them and bathe them and be with them and teach them. So I have a completely different concept of what it means to be, a stay-at-home person, stay-at-home dad or stay-at-home mom. I had it completely, I think, backwards in terms of what I found to be more valuable. Like, oh, she works or he works, and then the other one, stays at home. And I have to admit, I would be one of the, most guilty people of undervaluing that discipline, but I will never again do that.
So to wrap up this episode, can you please share words of encouragement, words of praise to the women in your life?
The women in my life are um, courageous. They're resilient. Um, they're intelligent. They're compassionate. Um, they're giving. They're generous. Um, there are a lot. I could go on and on, but I think those are the things that come to mind.
Well, thank you so much. It was a pleasure having you.
Thank you for having me.